Come on. Down two.
You're listening to the Get Peeled podcast, a space for life enthusiasts to get inspired, learn through others about fitness, business, relationships, and life itself. I'm your host, Hannah Eden, a fitness entrepreneur that has an obsession with sweating and a burning desire to share and inspire others with the lessons that I have learned through fitness. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Get Peeled podcast. I'm Hannah Eden, your host, and today I have the beautiful Ashley Clements with me, my guest here on Get Peeled. Ashley, how are you today?
Doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing so well. I always like to give a little bit of a brief introduction to whoever I'm speaking with, and it's really exciting for me to be talking with you today because you are going to be such a big part of our new project that we are releasing. But instead of just releasing this new meal plan that is what I'm referring to is our Beyond program that's be coming out on May 2nd, I wanted to give the opportunity to introduce the person that is designing the meal plan that goes with it, and a little bit more about who Ashley is as an individual and how she feels about nutrition, her philosophy, and then the ideas and thought process that we both put together to go into Beyond. So Ashley has, I'm going to read this so I don't do this wrong, okay? But Ashley's education background includes an undergraduate degree in psychology, a master's in clinical nutrition, and certifications in health coaching and sports nutrition. She has spent over 7 years working with clients whose goals range from disease management and prevention to weight loss and enhanced sports performance. So that's a massive, I like that intro right there. How are you, Ashley?
Thank you so much. Doing so well. And it's so exciting to be a part of this with you. I love that I'm going to be able to hopefully reach more people, educate more people. I think that nutrition education, really does so much for just the human experience because it really amplifies it. So yeah, doing well, super excited.
I know you're super busy, so thank you so much for being here today. We were just talking and I wanted to make sure we were rolling so that we could include this, but you mentioned something and I always love to have our community of people or our audience know who you are, like not just on a outside level, but like on a personal level. And you just said two things that are my favorite things. Nutrition and food. I absolutely love it. And then you said dogs as well. And I absolutely love dogs. So tell me what you do with the dog rescue part. That's what I was going to ask you. And I was like, wait, let's stop. Let's record this.
Yeah, that's fun. So outside of the nutrition role that I have, or that I, or my nutrition work, I direct a dog rescue. And so, the need for helping dogs who have been neglected and abused or abandoned is so immense. And so we have just kind of joined that mission to help reduce the incidences of like dogs being like left out or again neglected and abused. And so I direct a dog rescue. We have tons of dogs in care currently, so puppies, adult dogs, senior dogs, but I do that in addition to my nutrition work.
Now, is it true that during COVID, when we were all locked down, like a bunch of rescue centers were empty because people were just adopting dogs?
It was pretty amazing. There was so much celebration to that. So a lot of photos circulating of these like empty kennels. It's such an amazing and such a rare thing. But yes, I think it was very temporary. And so now we're complete opposite where every shelter that I'm aware of is just completely at capacity. And so there's just not enough room for the dogs. And so, anybody who loves dogs that can help, should definitely look into helping in whichever way that they can. But yes. So
how can they find out more about that? What is it called?
I mean, they could go to our website, which is rescuepack.com. So just rescuepac.com. There they'll see dogs that need to be fostered or adopted. But if they want to just learn more, I think they can just reach out to us through the website so that we can share information.
Oh, thank you, man. That's so cool. And thank you for everything you do. Dogs need us. I love animals so much.
Yes, I agree.
Really do.
I agree.
Oh. And then nutrition. Help me understand, like, why did you decide to do a master's in clinical nutrition? How did you take that route?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think this might, serve true for a lot of nutritionists. But there's such a healing component to food. And when we experience it, I think that it's so amazing. And I think this is also true of fitness. It's so amazing and so inspiring that, it really calls some people to dive a lot deeper into that. And so for me, my undergrad is in psychology. So I always knew that I wanted to help people in some way. I think in getting that degree, I just realized how significant that nutrition journey was for me. So I gave up animal products when I was 12. And that was mostly, a concern for animal welfare issue for me personally. But then I started to learn more about things. So I didn't have such a tunnel vision of, like, oh, don't eat meat. So really diving into the importance of all the nutrients and how it serves the body. And it's just so fascinating, and it's so complex, and it's just never ending how much information is out there. And so a lot of, self-experimenting. And then I just got to a point one day that I, realized I think this is the way that I want to help people. And so, so I think it was a really cool moment, because I decided that, like, internally, and it was one of those really strong decisions where you just know, like, this is what I need to do. And so I probably the next week, I was approached by a doctor who worked out at the gym that I worked out at. And he was just like, I hear you talking in the sauna all the time about nutrition. I really would like for you to come work with me. And so that's
Awesome.
when that's when I knew. I was like, okay, that's my sign. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to study nutrition. This is the route I want to go. And so I've been doing it since, and it's so amazing. And it's just never boring. Every human body is so different. So working with every new person is just like a whole new puzzle or a whole new book to explore. But yeah, I mean, that's how I got into it. And I love it. The science of it is so awesome. That's probably my favorite part. And I love imparting that education. I love sharing that and helping people understand that with me. So
do you still, maybe you said that, but did you still not eat animal products? Or that was what you decided to do at 12 and just felt so many benefits from that?
So good question. No, I did cut them out at 12. I think maybe around the age of 21 is when I decided to just start experimenting. I think at that point I just knew more about nutrition, and I wanted to get a better sense of what was working for my body. And so I did include some animal products at that point. And then I kind of fluctuated. So a lot of experimenting, like I did everything from raw vegan to pescatarian, ovo vegetarian, ate red meat for a short period of time. And it was really a journey of figuring out what really settled well with my body. And now I'm in a point where I am eating primarily vegetarian. So no, or I guess I would call it more vegan. So no dairy. And then again, all of this is really coming back to how my body responded to certain foods, and then what I know of generally what a food response or what a food causes in the body. So currently I would call myself vegan, but it's been
so
a journey.
Interested in this. Awesome.
Yeah.
And this is actually maybe a good leeway. And to give everyone a bit of a background here, we've been doing this whole fitness thing for years now. And I've been very open and very honest from the very beginning. And my biggest fear is becoming a sellout, which would, to me means like, I'm just going to create anything and just put it online. Like, I know enough about nutrition to be able to put a meal plan together. I don't have all these credentials and letters after my name, but it's not my passion. The way that you feel, so that's your calling. That's what I feel about fitness and the body, right? I'm fascinated by the body. I'm fascinated by trying to stop pain, not trying to work around it, but understanding it, and so on and so forth. So we can relate on that topic right there. But I think it's really important that people know that I have always wanted to bring an outside nutrition component, because it's not, I'd be doing my people a disservice, right? So this is Ashley. Ashley is extremely well versed in this world, and is not only just prescribing these diets for us to try and follow on these meal plans to try and abide by, but there's rhyme and reason behind it. And again, being totally honest, whenever Ashley and I put our heads down to decide to do Beyond, we talked about our nutritional philosophy. We aligned in a lot of ways. And then she sent it through, and I was saying how I have experimented with vegan before. It wasn't something that necessarily supported my lifestyle and my body, but it wasn't something that I knew enough about to speak about it. Now, can you help me understand like certain parts about it as to why maybe these things happened?
Yeah. So you mean why it didn't work out, right?
Yeah. So for example, I did the vegan, I try to commit to a vegan diet, I guess you call it that. I don't really like that word, but for 30 days. And I know that's not
Okay.
an extensive amount of time, which could also be another reason why my body was maybe adjusting. But I did notice that I had really dry skin. I had really dry hair. I felt like I had a lot of gut issues going on because I was trying to eat the food by cooking it from scratch and not going to the vegan aisle and getting fake chicken and fake meat and fake eggs and all of this. So I just understood
Yes.
that it was very time consuming, which is great if I had the time, but I don't.
Uh-huh.
Life is so quick. So I caught myself not eating enough because there wasn't an option for me, or I wasn't educated enough to make the right decision. So I went without. So I ended up under eating. But the gastric distress, I felt like as soon as I introduced plant-based omegas, it started to go away. But prior to that, I wasn't including that at all, which I would usually get from animal-based products. And my body started to react. Could you help me understand why? I've never really spoken about it online either, because I don't have the knowledge to explain to the rest of the world why.
Yeah. And coming back to the point that, every human body is so different. Some people are going to thrive on a vegan diet or a plant-based diet, and other people won't. And so it's so important while you're trying them out. I would actually say it's important to try them out, because if you don't, you'll just never know.
Right.
And then when you do try them out, it's really listening to the cues. So what is the response? What is the response to a food after I eat this? Even, not just immediately after, but like days after, how am I feeling? Some people can digest plant carbohydrates very well. And then other people really struggle. I would say it can get a little bit complicated in that it would even come down to the state of somebody's microbiome, maybe even how well they're chewing food or how they're preparing food. But I think for a number of reasons, it could work or it couldn't have worked. Genetics is another thing. So we want to even, touch on genetically, does it make sense for me, for my body to eat only plants? Some people have a really hard time converting things like carotenoids into retinol. And so for these people, it would make more sense to get that nutrient from an animal product instead of like tons and tons of vegetables, just to try to get enough of that one nutrient. So I think you did an excellent job then at really paying attention to what am I feeling after I'm eating these meals, and is it serving me? Am I like struggling? Am I falling behind, or am I really thriving, and is my energy better? And so it may just be that, for you and your lifestyle too, that it just wasn't like the best fit. I would also say that I think with whatever particular diet, there are certain ways to approach it to make sure that it's well balanced. So what you did in making sure everything was whole food based and you're, less packaged food, like less prepared, that is so ideal. And you're right, it does take more time, but in the end, it's so worth it, because that's the way you get the most benefit from it. I would just say it's worth trying. If it didn't work out for you, I think that you just made the right choice to move on and do something different.
Now, I will say that, first question is, do you think 30 days is long enough?
It can be.
Okay, that's cool.
I think that you can tell, and again, this really depends. It depends on where the person's starting, but you're healthy. So you're healthy, you're active. I would say that you would probably be able to tell fairly quickly, like maybe within 2 weeks, if something is serving you or not. Mm-hmm.
That's great to know. And this, I guess, kind of wraps up our joint vision and joint philosophy towards food, which is there is no one size fits all. And this is what is so hard being online and reaching so many people. It's like, how do you create something that is going to be suitable for everyone? You can't do that. That's impossible. But what I do know is that there is so much bad information out there, that there's all of these diets right now that have become fashionable. So people aren't doing, people aren't doing vegan or paleo or keto or any of this stuff because they know for a fact. Let me rephrase what I'm saying. A lot of people aren't doing them for the right reasons. They're doing them because they're cool. They're doing them because they see that's what people are doing, or they see certain people look incredible. They want to look like that. So that's what I got to eat. I think it's so important that both you and I explain that they are great nutrition philosophies or diets, if you want to call them that, but they're also not one size fits all. So experimenting in all of these different types is a good idea, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the person that you want to look like aesthetically, if you eat what they eat, you're going to look like that. That's just not how it works.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Because again, it's such a good example. Like if vegan is working for me, but it wasn't working for you, then your body's not going to respond as, favorably in whichever way you're trying to get it to respond, whether it be like for a health goal, like I want my cholesterol levels to be better, or my blood sugar to be better, or I want to look a certain way. So whatever the goal exactly, it's not a one size fits all. What works for somebody really may not work for you. Again, even consider genetics. Some people process fats better than others. And so for the people who don't do that very well, keto is just not going to work. So where it works for one person, it just won't work for, that other person. So yes.
And I think that to that point, and I'm only saying all of this because I'm trying to think about this as someone's listening that's never heard me or you speak about nutrition before, right? Or really may not know much about nutrition at all, and they're trying to start to make changes. You often hear people say stuff like, oh, I'm really carb sensitive, or I don't process fats very well. Like, is there any way of us actually knowing that for real until we breathe into a machine that actually reads real data that's coming from the inside of our body out, such as I know that there's a new product called I've totally brain farted on it, but I have one. Let me grab it real quick. But Lumen, there we go, the Lumen, which is this device right here. And I am not sponsored by these guys at all, but you blow into it, you do it multiple times, and it measures how much carbon dioxide you have within your breath and how you are going to be using and food as fuel. Is it are we breaking down fats as energy? Are we using carbs as energy? It's actual data. Do you believe that that's the only way to know this, or you can maybe feel it out or be able to know that answer?
So I think you can do both, but I think it really depends on how aware you are and how, I guess, your point of knowledge on, foods and food reactions. Because again, a food response can happen days later and not even just immediately after. So if I eat something that I'm sensitive to, it can be the next day that, I really notice the response and the reaction. And so at that point, it's really hard for me to really piece it together, so those delayed responses can be, I think, part of what's challenging. But if you're aware to look for things like that, then again, that might be a little bit easier. But I think that the tools like Lumen, what you're speaking of, it's helpful to know where our body is currently. And then other things like continuous glucose monitors are also really interesting and really helpful in helping us decide what our body is or how our body is responding to food. So thankfully we have so many tools.
Help me understand a little bit more about that, the glucose monitor, just so I can know what that means and what that is.
So typically, the only people who used to monitor glucose levels were those who were, or are diagnosed with diabetic, and that's just to kind of help regulate blood sugar and insulin activity. But now I think it's more popular with anybody really shooting for that goal of living longer, living better, responding super well to food, or picking that best diet for them. And so it's a little device that you attach to your arm. And when you eat a carbohydrate, what you get to do then is get to see how your blood sugar responds to that food. And so if it spikes blood sugar, then that food you're probably, or that's probably not your ideal food, because if your blood sugar is spiked, that's not good. It's a little bit overwhelming to the system, and that's what you're always trying to avoid. We know that refined carbohydrates, those obviously spike blood sugar. Breads, cakes, cookies, all of those things are a no-go, but there are some natural foods that will do that for people too. So certain fruits and things of that nature. So I think that's just another tool that's helpful so that we know how to better pick things like carbohydrates, as an example.
Awesome. That's a great piece. That is a great piece of information. Thank you so much. Now, obviously, we are releasing Beyond, that's coming soon. So I wanted to give a little bit of a background on you, a little bit of a background on where we both feel and how we feel about nutrition and just how complex it is. So then with all of that being said, it then leads to the question of, well, then how do you put this plan together? And our conversation before we actually made it into before it went down onto paper was this, right? Which is, there is not one size fits all, but here's what we need to do is be able to provide a better option than what most are doing right now. So eating good, real, healthy, nutritious foods that are wholesome and that have reason behind them and have certain nutritional benefits that will help us in other ways, which is where I'm going to lead to with what happened whenever I read the first week that you put together before we continued. I said, I'm surprised there isn't as much animal-based products with every meal. That's just what I'm used to. And help me understand. I'm not opposed to it, because I agree with a lot of the things that you're saying, that we don't actually, and that's something I learned after going vegan, is that I didn't need to consume as much protein as I thought I did. And I definitely didn't keep up the amount of protein I was eating from animals afterwards. But I noticed that there wasn't. And then I asked you why. And help me help the audience understand that.
Yes. So I think that when we think like traditionally building muscle and, getting lean, high protein is what we hear a lot of. And I think still even in like weight loss clinics and weight loss programs, it's like the higher the protein, the leaner you'll get. And there are different reasons for that. The obvious is that the protein helps us build muscle. And so more muscle means that we have a leaner body composition. But then there's also that protein is super satiating. And so it really helps us stay full so that we don't feel that need to eat all of the other things. So protein, in the sense that it does help with feelings of fullness and that it is really great for muscle building or muscle synthesis, makes sense. But we, I think, pushed a little bit too hard on how much protein we need for all the different programs. So you have weight loss programs, you have muscle building. I think for the sake of really ramping up muscle tissue and muscle growth, high protein does make a lot of sense. And so you can have animal protein at different meals, because that helps to increase growth factor, which is really going to help, again, build that muscle. But in doing that too frequently, I think for some people, and then this comes down to, their own state of health, their health history, what they're prone to, even genetically, it can also just drive the aging process further, because you think, if I'm in a state of growth, then I'm accelerating, right? Like that, or my body in this period of time, that growth acceleration also, I would just relate closely to age acceleration. And so you don't always want to be in that state of, growing too quickly. Yes. Yeah. You want to take your breaks. And then you want to, again, kind of plan them out to when it's most appropriate. So if right now I need to build more muscle, this is when I would have, the most protein, and I can have animal protein at most of these meals, because it's really going to help the process. Animal protein has all of the essential amino acids and methionine, which really helps to speed that up. But when I want to be more in that like maintenance phase, or I don't need to bulk up necessarily, but I do want to build good muscle, then I don't need protein at every meal. So if I'm thinking like longevity and how to build muscle during while eating for longer lifespan too, then I would just be more thoughtful of, when do I have that high protein meal with animal protein in it? Probably like after a workout would be really smart, or just kind of working it around the workout would be smart, so that you continue to build muscle while also keeping, again, longer lifespan. So animal protein isn't necessary for every meal. And then again, this is us thinking like beyond that whole traditional, like, let's just bulk up. It's let's also think about our long-term, life, basically, like our whole experience moving forward. So there's a way to do both. There's a way to build muscle and also think about like the long run.
And the total macronutrients throughout the day, it also remains the same as it would if you were going to be eating all animal-based protein, right? But there are other ways to consume enough protein through vegetables that doesn't require that. That's also something that most people don't think about. That they just look at vegetables as something totally different and only look at meats or eggs as protein, which is not necessarily the way at all.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's such a good point. I think that, yes, when we think protein, that's the first thing that comes. Like, we think back to the to like My Plate, right? When they talk about protein, that's what you see. And so that's what we learn as, this is our protein source. But there are so many plants that offer protein. So you get plenty of protein from broccoli. Not all of the plants might be complete proteins, but we eat so much in a day that you end up getting all of those amino acids to make that complete protein, or to receive all of the amino acids you need in a day. So you're right. Plants pack in a bunch. And I think we, a lot of the times, fail to consider that. So if we're planning all of this animal protein consumption, and then we're eating all of this other food that also has protein, then we're just like adding, and we might not need all of that. So good
And
point.
is it true that whenever we eat animal-based protein, I'm going to relate this back to intermittent fasting, right? I have, and you can totally correct me if I'm wrong here, but in the past I have explained it in a very simple terms, which is if we're always eating, I compared it to having like all these little minions inside of your body that are workers, and if they have a job to do, which is to keep you alive, right? And if they're always working on digestion, if they're always breaking down foods, then they don't necessarily have the time to go to other parts of your body to get rid of shit that shouldn't be there, bad cells, whatever it may be. So whenever we fast, we give ourselves enough window of time that those little minions will be able to complete their job in the first hour of their shift, and then for the next X amount of hours they'll be able to free to do other things. Is that a good analogy on a really simple terms of what fasting is?
I think so. It's really cute. Yeah. I like it. And you think about, so with minions being the example, what they are, like you said, workers, so energy being used to make something happen, right? But yes, the body has only so much energy to spend in a day. And there are so many tasks that need to be completed. You're so right. And if we are constantly eating, whatever, I mean, so protein is one. Protein can be a little bit hard to break down too. So even think about the work that it takes to break that down. But yeah, if the body's always working on digestion, then what happens when we really want to complete that detoxification process and there's no time to do that in a day, then we just start accumulating toxins.
Which could lead to autoimmune disease. Is that where this kind of goes down to? Or
so toxin accumulation can lead to, I think, a lot of issues. And I think something even really more relevant to most people, because everybody wants to lose, fat if there's fat accumulated on the body. Even like excessive toxin storage in the body can really hinder that fat loss process. So if we're always eating, and then like you mentioned, there are so many other, I think, health concerns that are much more severe, that toxin load can really, I think, speed up or cause that disease process to happen for us. So lots of different things, totally depends on the person. Even if you wanted to bring up Alzheimer's as a thing, if we don't have time to detox, if we're not like sleeping well and we're not, again, feeding our body correctly, or we're not giving ourselves the energy to even like cleanse out the brain at night, that's something that could increase our risk of that. But yeah, I think it's a good analogy. Yeah, there's so much that the body needs to do. So breaks are very nice.
Awesome. Now that would lead me to the point of the protein. Is it true that, and I think you just answered that for me in that it is harder for the body the minions to break down like a dense protein such as a steak than it would be to break down enough throughout the day vegetable accumulation to get a full protein from vegetables? Is that true?
I think it'll depend. So it really depends, I think, on the person, right? So are we producing enough enzymes to break down XYZ? So your pancreas produces these these enzymes that break down the food for us. It also, the digestive process relies on the microbiome and the state of the bacteria in the gut. Like, are there enough of all of the things in there to break those foods down for us? But then I would also go back to how that food is prepared. So you were talking about a steak. Let's say that is, I don't know, heated over a grill at really high temperatures and it's cooked thoroughly, like all the way through. Then it becomes really tough and almost like denatured protein that, yes, is really hard for the body to totally break down.
Interesting. So if I have a well done steak versus a rare steak, because rare would be naturally how our ancestors ate it, right? Or somewhat, maybe they cooked it, I don't know. But that would be harder for the body than it would be rare, even though it's the same source.
Because heat denatures protein. And so the more heat applied would really make a difference. And you'll notice, like in our plan, it's so subtle, but recommending a soft boiled egg versus a hard boiled egg because it's less heat applied. And so by applying less heat, you even preserve some of those nutrients. So that egg yolk is going to offer so much more nutrition than if you applied too much heat for too long and made it that hard boiled egg. So
Wow.
heat matters. I would also even stewed meats are really a better option instead of like seared, like pan seared or anything again at too high of a heat.
Interesting, man.
Yeah, it is
Love
really
this.
interesting. So how you cook food really matters. Yeah.
Interesting. So
Mhm.
give us this wrap up this amazing call, by the way, which should not be the last one. We should continue to do this. And I've
Yeah.
asked
Oh, yeah.
our community already whatever they want to know, because I think this is fascinating. But what was your thought process after our conversations going into this beyond meal nutrition component, and what can people expect?
Yes. So I'm so glad that we're going to cover that. It may be a little strange that there's no dairy, but there is no dairy in the plan. I did make sure to note that if somebody really wanted to, that's okay. The reason for that is because largely most people experience some kind of inflammation or inflammatory response after consuming dairy. And so by removing that for this period of time or for these 5 weeks, we're really going to help the body recover a little bit. So
Awesome.
it would be kind of like if you were like knocking down, like let's say you had like a chute, right, and you were throwing rocks down the chute and it was always damaging the whole, like the walls of that. That damage is gonna, if you keep throwing those rocks down that chute, the damage is only going to get worse and worse and worse and cause bigger problems, right? Or even just break the system. But if you can stop and allow, let's say, minions to come in and repair that chute, then we can do some recovery. And then I think just experience what even like better digestion is. So allowing room for recovery not only requires time away from eating, sometimes like fasting, but also requires time away from certain foods that cause an inflammatory response in the gut. So not a lot of dairy or no dairy, ideally. Gluten does the same thing. So really staying away from gluten. And then you'll find a high fiber, really plant focused meal, I think all over that plan. So lots of vegetables in the meals. Let's see.
Can you help me out? Can you go over the tofu and from the soy point of view as to why that's in there as well?
Yes, I think so. There's a common misconception that, okay, that's going to cause like, me to look more womanly if I'm, eating tofu.
I'll call it out. That's what men think, that if they eat tofu and they eat soy, that they grow tits. Yes. Right. That's what they rumor
right. Is. Right. And so yes, very simply put, yeah, exactly that. But there's actually so many benefits to that. So if you can get organic is so important, because soy, like corn, is such an overproduced food that's typically loaded with pesticides, which those pesticides actually act as an endocrine disruptor and can cause things like breast tissue in males. So organic is crazy important when we're choosing things like soy. So organic, less processed, there are really awesome benefits to that. And so the benefits include enhancing arterial elasticity. So meaning that your arteries can kind of open up easier and allow blood to flow more quickly and better throughout the body. What that means also is that you have better muscle recovery after a workout. Your brain is more fired up during the day because you're receiving that oxygen all over. Everything generally just tends to work better when blood flow is better. So stamina is better, your workouts are going to be improved. So soy, just like with anything eaten in moderation, really has these benefits. And I think to stay away from that is that's to our disadvantage, because we're just assuming, that some information is correct. But I think we need to look at all of that and make a decision based off of that.
I love that. Thank you so much, man. Is there anything else about it that you would like to throw out there? Or if you want, we could actually film a separate video for people that do buy the program, and we can break it down on a lower level. But from a higher level, is there anything that you want to add towards the design of this one?
I might, yeah. I would say that by eating this way and really focusing on those whole foods, yes, it takes more time. It might be a little bit different from what you're used to, but because it's so fiber focused and so micronutrient dense, I think it's worth giving it a shot. And I think most people would really feel that within just a week or two, that it's worth it, because it's doing so much to enhance the microbiome. It's doing so much to, by enhancing the microbiome, optimize our mood, enhance that so we feel better throughout the day. Digestion issues, I think it can help resolve some of those things too. So it's really, if you really give it, that time, just like your body deserves, you deserve to do that. Like everybody deserves to do that for themselves at some point. So I would recommend it for those reasons. It's so much more than serving body composition. It's serving like the entire body and how it functions. So I think that would be the last thing I add, and it would be so awesome to kind of dive further into it later.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much,
Mhm.
Ashley. This was a really valuable session of 30 minutes. I think it's just been 30 minutes, but wow, I've learned a lot. I'm sure everyone that has listened as well has as well. But where can these guys find you and bother you if they want any more services from you?
Yeah. So if anybody's interested in getting more specific, because again, everybody is so different. So what works for my body versus what works for like my husband's body, that kind of thing. It's coregenixatx.com. And so you can just send me an email and tell me what you're interested in learning more about. I'm super happy to share that, whether it be through just sharing some information because you're curious to read on your own, or if you really want to dive into your own, like experiment, learning what works for your body specifically, or more specifically, I'm there for that too.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
I really appreciate you. And we'll catch up soon.
Yes. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.